everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so happy that you all have gathered with us today and tonight and have continued to. This is now episode 7. I'm so proud of us and community for coming into community with us. This is What Happened to the African Teacher, episode 7, where we explore the challenging yet triumphant attempt of the AP African American Studies course with the woman who has pioneered this class and this course in Brooklyn. What she has done is just outstanding for the community. And I can't wait to delve into this conversation. Shannah Henderson-Amare is here with us, and we are so appreciative and we are so happy that she has gathered with us. As always, thank you. My name is Khadijah Smith. I am a now 20-year educator. Went from teacher, educational, instructional coach to principal, now traveling math coach. I also teach math at the Howard University for undergraduate students, and I am the associate editor of the Journal for Negro Education at the School of Education at Howard. So I'm so excited. And again, thank you so much for being community with us. And I will pass it over to my co-host, Sinema Olatunji. Amen.
So good evening. Like Khadijah said, my name is Sinema Amen Olatunji. I am a lifelong educator and social worker. Have had a very similar trajectory to Khadijah. Started in the secondary space as a high school English teacher and instructional coach, and then went on to get my master's of social work from Howard University. I have taught social work. I teach in social work department at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I do some regional education attainment work in the state of North Carolina. And this podcast, this webinar, is rooted really in our experiences having grown up in an African-centered environment and having gone to an African-centered school. And so, as Khadijah said, we have our good friend, Shannah Henderson-Amare. I know her as Sherry Ebb. And I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to her, and then we're going to jump into tonight's conversation. We are, as Khadijah said, so excited to be talking about this. So Shannah Henderson-Amare is a lifelong educator and assistant principal in New York City's public school system. Her career spans nearly 2 decades of service as a teacher, leader, and advocate committed to education equity and cultural authenticity. She is a champion of student empowerment. She helped launch one of New York City's first, I'm gonna say that again. She helped launch one of New York City's first AP African American history courses after her students demanded more inclusive and truthful learning experiences. Shannah's work has been featured in the New York Times, NBC News, and News 12 Brooklyn for her pioneering leadership in curriculum reform. She continues to consult in New York City Public Schools, Hidden Voices, African Diaspora Texts, and the New Black Studies curriculum while pursuing her doctorate in educational leadership. So we welcome you to tonight. Thank you for joining us and leading us in this very important conversation.
Thank you both for having me.
Yes. So let's jump in. Talk to us a little bit. Tell our audience, the folks who are watching tonight, share your journey as an educator and what led you to the work you're doing today.
Wow. So I've always wanted to be a teacher. That's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. My mom sent me to college for political science. Next thing she knew, I graduated with a degree in teaching. While I was at St. John's, I started working for a grant program, a federally and state-funded grant program that worked with middle schoolers, preparing them for the post-secondary readiness track. While working with the middle schoolers, 7th and 8th graders, I also learned how to navigate the college space because I was that child that went to college unprepared for what it was. I didn't have a model. My high school guidance counselor did not support me. Like I tell people all the time, I picked my college from the side of a bus. My brother said I had to go to college, and I was being funny, and I was like, I saw the side of the bus, and there was an advertisement for a particular school, and I was like, oh, that's the one. I did the ED application by myself. I applied and I got in, all because of working with young people, preparing them for college and career readiness. When I graduated from St. John's, I found a school that spoke to that lived experience, right? Like I work at a school that what we do is college and career readiness. So now I am doing this work for 25 years. I did the math the other day when I was talking to my students, and it's been 25 years since I've been doing college and career readiness work. Over that time as administrator for the last 10 years, maybe, I lost track of how long I've been an administrator because I'm still a teacher. I still teach even though I'm an administrator. So in my administrative role, I've learned how to embrace more cultural proficiency and while supporting my teachers, right? Like, so a lot of my work in that space now is about culture and how you show up in the classroom to encourage students to show up the same way, creating that space and identity. Like identity and culture is big for me over the years, and all together, like that's my story. It's college and career readiness, showing up on a college campus as your authentic self, knowing who you are with a strong cultural identity.
So that's, that's a great segue, right? Identity, speaking to, just those experiences that you had that led you to a college campus, right? So now you're an administrator, you're in this school, and, you're bringing AP African American history to your school, right? Talk to us a little bit about what this process was like to bring this to the school that you are currently at, and really just kind of dive into how did student voice and advocacy play a role in this process?
Okay. Thanks for that question. That's um so first of all, I'm big on thanking those that came before me. We were not this first school in the United States, in New York City, to advocate for an AP African American or AP history course, right? We were not. Um, it just didn't exist. In the meantime, while the students were advocating for these spaces on a higher academic level, we had elective courses, right? Like my school had elective courses on the African diaspora, Latin American studies. We had race in America. Like we created space for our students to thrive and see themselves in the curriculum as a school. We also did a lot of work with our teachers around mindset. Just without having AP African American Studies or a class in African history, we did a lot of work around preparing Black and Brown boys to be in AP classes and dual enrollment classes and what that looks like, creating safe spaces for them. So we were doing this work for a lot of years. People think it happened overnight. It did not happen overnight. It happened over a long period of time. However, in the summer of May of 2020, literally in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd, I was doing AP recruitment for the fall. And I had my annual town hall virtually. And yet again, my students were like, here you go again, miss. Like, there's still no course. And then in that moment, I realized it was about offering them electives is one thing, but if I'm a college preparatory school and I'm pushing AP as the benchmark of college readiness, there was a disconnect for my students, right? And they called me out on that. So in a moment of frustration, I'm not a social media person, but in a moment of frustration, I called my colleague and I was like, I want to send this tweet. So I sent the tweet about what the students were saying and advocating for a class. And so I have to tell them this in the wake of all the unrest that's happening. And I got some responses from the DOE. We had some other things happening, but we didn't hear back anything until literally we heard the course, a pilot course was being offered. And I emailed the vice president of AP enrollment at that time. And I was like, hey, remember we had this conversation? We talked about this? And he was very receptive, very supportive. And he included our students into the pilot with me as a teacher. Because at that time, I did not have a teacher that was willing to teach the course. So and that's a whole nother story, right? For a bunch of different reasons. It was touchy, it was risky, it was all those things, right? Just spaces. We had our academic offerings already set. Like there's a lot of different things. So, and I love to teach. So I jumped in as a teacher because I also understood It was about my students' voice and advocacy and them finally getting what they've been asking for. It was too important.
Right.
And then we went to the Howard University that summer for our training. And I was like, yes, like, and that in itself was an amazing experience. And one of the things that resonated deeply, because I was nervous, right? Because I've had interactions with the College Board before, and it was like, I trusted the process, but I also was a little bit like, what is happening? And I
Right.
have to tell you, when I walked into that room and the number of Black male educators I saw preparing to teach AP class, especially AP African American Studies, I was like, this is it. Change is about to happen. And it's just been like, I shout out my colleagues. They have been supportive throughout the process. And that's the work. It's about unity. It's about student advocacy. It's about student voice. It's just about community.
Right.
So that's good, right? Because we have a bunch of men showing up to teach the class
Mm-hmm.
and reluctant for, and I don't know, this might not be your experience, but it is said to be reluctant for our Black boys in this
Mm-hmm.
space. So, and that could be twofold because you also talked about preparing a teacher to teach AP.
Yes.
And preparing a teacher to teach AP means that they can recognize a student who's ready. And
Right.
sometimes that might be blinded by their own bias in their own ways. So can you speak to that in terms of the disproportionate amount of Black educators, the Black male educators are there, but the Black boys don't seem to be there. And is it truly that they're not ready, or is it you think they're not being seen to be ready?
I think it's definitely a case where they're not being seen to be ready, right? So, for instance, in my school, we were intentional. We had 8, 9 AP course offerings. That was not issue. It was when we look around our AP class, it was heavily with girls. And we had to be very intentional to our boys and saying, I see you for this. This is why this is what this looks like, right? And creating that mindset shift in both the students and the teachers of like they belong. I tell my teachers, when I coach AP African American Studies teachers, you just can't be like, hey Johnny, welcome to class. Like, I'm glad to have you here. No, you gotta be like, Johnny, I'm so glad you're here. Like, this is gonna be a wonderful experience for you. I can't wait to connect. Like, what are you interested in? And bring them into the conversation. So I just want to take this second to shout out my new African American Studies teacher. Because I'm doing other things, right? And I was in a place where now my AP African American Studies class is being taught by a Black male. And I'm thrilled. I'm proud because he has a way of engaging with the boys that, it'll bring them in. They'll see themselves differently, and that's the goal. I still teach some of the lessons, but that's like heavily that needs a female perspective sometimes. We're a good team, but it really is about representation.
Right. And it sounds like you all set the stage for creating that safe space for the students and creating a sense of belonging for them, right?
Yes.
And I love what you said about how the kids called you out. And there's nothing like New York City kids, calling out the adults to say, you've provided us this foundation of being able to see who we are, from a perspective that builds our cultural identity.
Yes.
But yet you are still not really meeting the needs that we have, to build on the foundation that you have set, right? And so those lived experiences that your students had, how did that play a role in this process?
Oh, wow. It's funny because as we were learning the curriculum, there's still all this protest about teaching African American studies, teaching Black studies, all this stuff. So one of the things we look at in the curriculum is the birth of African American studies on the college campus.
Mm.
And it resonates with them because it's like, oh, we still having this conversation. This is our fight. So for my Pod 1 kids, I thank them. I love them seriously. Like they did it with me because we were fighting on so many levels, right? We were fighting to be seen, to be heard nationally, to make this class come to fruition, understanding the legacy of this was somebody else's fight that we still have to fight. when it comes to topics like HBCUs, it's gives the students a kind like they understand sisterhood and brotherhood in a very different way. They understand finding your space on a college campus. I've had students that end up not going to HBCUs. They ended up going to PWI because they got full scholarships. But one of my students that took AP African American Studies, she was intentional about reaching out to the African Studies department at her PWI to creating a space for her before she even got there.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's how it shows up. It's about advocacy. It's about having them find their space. But when we talk about lessons like lifting as we climb, about sisterhood, right? It's not, we're not going to be out here cussing each other out and tearing each other down because we know better. And that just helps them to see themselves better. That helps them to see themselves as excellence because somebody's depending on them.
That's good. So let's focus on that one line you said, we know better, right? And sometimes it's the adults that don't always know better, right? So we're going to get a little bit deep into this. So while we know that this course was deeply meaningful for your students, we also know that the introduction of the AP African American Studies course stirred some broader and very different community responses than you expected. So when when your school implemented this course, attorney Ben Crump retweeted the interview with NBC News, highlighting the importance of this course. And to your surprise, you received some backlash about you and your school bringing AP African American Studies to students. So talk to us about the challenges and the resistance that you faced from the adults around bringing this to our students.
So I have to start up my staff because my staff was in it with me. We've had advocates of all walks of life, of all diversity that was like, it's about the students. So that helped me to stay focused. But when I tell you I had Black folk coming for me also, it was like, I was shocked. I was hurt. Literally, my husband was like, get off of social media. My principal was like, stop checking social media. And if you know my husband, you'll know, like, for him to get off of social media. But it was reading them comments, it was hard because people were literally like, so what were they doing before that they needed the course? Like they weren't teaching them kids about themselves. And I'm like, that's not what we said. It's a matter of rigor. It's a matter of college readiness. It's a matter of equity. Everybody else is represented. Why not our students, right? It was also like, we don't need these schools to be teaching this stuff. Like we can teach at home. Well, the number of grandmas that told me, a number of moms and dads that told me that they didn't learn this in school, I appreciate that, right? But then what is your child doing 6 hours a day? They're not learning about themselves.
Right.
I had grandmas show up to parent-teacher conferences and tell me how much they are able to engage with their students. Like their students come home, the youngsters come home, and they're talking about the curriculum. They're talking about these topics, and they're able to have these deeper conversations. That's what it's about. No one said the curriculum is going to teach every single thing. The African diaspora, the African American studies experience is vast. It's deep. It's rich. It's entrenched in history. We can't teach that all in a year. All we're doing is creating space for our students to ask questions. And yet somehow, for some adults, that message did not resonate as well as I would hoped.
Well, why do you think that is? Like, where do you think that comes from? Like, why, what, we can name a bunch of things we can name, right? But why do you think in your community that was the case? Why would it be one thing?
It's just what I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It wasn't necessarily in my community, because both New York Times and NBC articles went nationally.
Oh, okay.
So like I received national opinions being sent to me or being spewed at me, right? And I'm not the only one. A lot of other teachers also experience similar types of resistance.
You would think it would only be from a space of, hey, Like, oh, I don't want the Black children to know about, or I don't want these white children to know about Black history. But this is not that. That is not the conversation. That is not the conversation we're having. You would think it would be like an anti-Blackness conversation, right? Like, oh, a racist conversation. But you're dealing with
Because we
people
expected that.
right. We expected that. Like, okay. But Black people saying it should, we know it should, right? So so continue. I cut you up, but
No,
that's
thanks.
the conversation.
I think it's a lack of public schools, right? It's a lack of trust in public schools.
Mm.
It's this idea that the teachers just going to show up and they just going to teach whatever they want anyway, and we have no control. And I'm very much would like to spread the message that whatever happens inside of a school in the community that your child goes through was within your control. If you're not showing up to PTA meetings, if you're not showing up to school board meetings, if you're not showing up to the CECs in New York City, if you're not being a parent that's advocating for what your child is learning, that's on you. The teachers want space to do their jobs and do their jobs well. The teachers teachers I know that really care about children, and there are plenty out there, want parents to advocate for them to do their jobs effectively. So I think it's a lack of public schools. Like we don't trust them, but they're not going to do what's right by our kids anyway. So we're not going to engage. And I just think that's a bad attitude. We have to engage in public schools to make them better.
So since we're engaging, right? Engaging in public schools to make them better, why do you believe that an AP African American course is especially important for Black students?
Dr. Carr, I'm gonna quote Baba. Dr. Carr says, between the curriculum and the students is the teacher. Right? So it's our responsibility as educators to make sure that whatever curriculum we're being given, we find spaces that our students can generally interact, be seen, be heard, be valued, right? Like that is our work. Because some of this curriculum is going to change overnight. This curriculum changes constantly, but we have a responsibility to make sure that our students are valued and they see themselves represented.
And you said in the beginning, you started your career, what brought you on this pathway was college readiness, right? Yep. Some of the stats that we pulled in the 2023-2024 school year, we found that only 76% of Black students attended high schools that offered 5 or more AP courses, right? And just even knowing the training that teachers must go through in order to be able to teach an AP class, right? And this is in comparison to their Asian and Hispanic counterparts, where Asian students, 93% of them and 84% of Hispanic students had access to AP classes. And then we also, saw some stats around, Black students facing significantly fewer opportunities to, take those advanced coursework, right? So dual enrollment, being able to, get college credit while they're in high school, having advanced STEM. And I know Khadijah, as a math, professor at Howard, could speak to, the students having those types of courses in high school. So we're going to shift a little bit. This is such a great conversation. Talk to us about how offering the AP African American Studies course transformed your students and you as an educator, and even your staff.
The fact that it now exists proves that advocacy and student voice matters, right? Yes, there were other petitions. Yes, there were other advocates for the course, but saying that we did it and it didn't happen does not mean we stop. We just keep asking for it, right? And timing is everything. So just that alone is important because we were the first in Brooklyn, which you would think like Brooklyn is so heavily all that, right? But we were. And I take no, and I tell everybody, I take no pride in being the first because I love Bettina Love. So Bettina Love says $1.1 billion is owed to Black folk for being denied rich, engaging learning conditions.
Mm.
So it's our time to, like, this is one way that we are collecting on that. We are creating space for our students. We are creating opportunities for them that just help them to show up on a college campus. Now, let me be very clear. If my students decide that they don't want to go to college, I am okay with that at this point in my career, because I also understand that the choice to say, I don't want this, this is not for me, this is why, is their agency. Like, they can do that. But they have to, but I am proud when they're able to have these conversations with me and says, this is why I miss, this is why I don't want to do this. And here's my plan. But also what I tell people is the college and career readiness work is about rigorous reading, writing, advanced classes. So people think, I'm gonna go to trade school. Have you tried to read those technical books? Those technical books are hard to read. It's still the same complex languages. So thinking that you're not going to go to college, but you're going to go to trade school, learn a trade, or take a trade exam, you still need to have high level reading, writing abilities so that you can pass these exams and you can navigate your life. My students are just, I think, better off, and students that take African American studies are better off because now they have a sense of who they are while they're doing it.
So what has that done for you? Like in this space of, and you are the first in Brooklyn, whether we like it or not, thank God, somebody had to do it, okay? Somebody had to do it. So what has that done for you in like positioning yourself to ensure that more Black children, more children, just in Brooklyn, just in New York, or all nationally, what has it, how has it transformed you to know that, and you've seen what happened to your students, and how have you pushed that in other spaces?
So I've definitely teamed up with other Department of Education programs that are pushing like the Black Studies curriculum and hidden voices to make sure that it's not only in a high school AP enrollment, but it's K through 12, right? Like, so there's a whole, in the DOE, there's a whole K through 12 scope. If you want it, it is there and available for you. Right? So like the first time they learned about Queen Nzinga is not when they come to AP African American Studies. They would have been exposed to Queen Nzinga in kindergarten, in 5th grade, throughout, right? So I think that's really important that it exists. You just have to look for it and advocate for it. If your school doesn't have it, advocate for it. It exists. So how it changes me is building alliances with people and understanding that there are people whose heart is in the work, and it's so important. Also, for me, it's about just reading the text of like W.E.B. and Booker T while you're working with kids and double consciousness. I went back to school, something I thought I would never do. But just like doing this work, and thanks my guidance counselor kind of pushed me in the lane also. But it was like I had people around me that were like, no, you're doing good work, like this matters. And I got pushed into now going back to school. Something I like that. So that for me has been monumental shift and change. I see my students show up differently. I've had students that have taken the course, that have been to college campuses, PWIs, and come back and like, imposter syndrome, I know it exists, but I didn't experience it. This is how I navigated it. Like, this is how I found my people. Like, and that made me feel really good.
Love that. Tell the people what you're studying. What are you going back to school for?
I'm getting my doctorate in education and leadership, and I'm studying the lived experiences of educators, like how school building leaders create spaces through school culture and climate that represents their lived experiences in order to mirror for students.
Love that. And that makes me
identity.
and congratulations to you, because you wear a lot of hats. And so adding the hat of student, that's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about you talked about, that community. You started this process with a cohort of teachers,
Yes.
and this program, it started with, what was it, 60 schools?
60 schools. Mm-hmm.
And now how many schools is it in nationwide?
The
It's like,
full rollout, I think we're well over 1,000 schools.
yeah, it's like some 1,200. And
Yeah.
so that original cohort, what has
Mm-hmm.
that been like, and what has that support? I know walking onto Howard's campus and getting that training, you all must have felt that you were a part of something really big. And what has that been like for you all?
And that has been transformational. We still communicate on a regular basis, not only about the course, but just about life, right? Like challenges that happen with our own kids navigating spaces. Like sometimes we do this work and then our own kids find themselves in spaces and we're like, what am I supposed to do? How do we react? Right. So like just that community and support, but also quite a few members of the cohort are now contributors to textbooks. Like before, when I think a couple years ago, I was like, who writes these textbooks? I can say I know the writers of the AP African American Studies textbooks. I can say I know the writers of some of the supplemental materials for the AP African American textbooks. I can tell you even the curriculum development, say what you want, but their heart and their soul and their spirit went into that curriculum. So whatever it is not, fill in the pieces. But people's work and sweat and spirit went into that work. And it's good to be able to say, like, I'm reading a textbook and I know the author, like I know the editor. I know who's writing the test questions. Like, and
Right. And that it just goes to show how the natural and organic way in which this process even bloomed into the Afrocentric value of like interconnection,
yes.
right? Um, and so that's wonderful. I'm gonna ask you a little bit about curriculum, right?
Okay.
Why do you believe that representation in curriculum? And you said that, look, I know who's writing the textbook, I know who's writing these, journal articles and these supplemental documents. Why do you believe representation in curriculum is essential for all students, not just Black students, right? Why do you think that that's important?
I'm gonna quote Baba Carr again, right? It's like Black people are not a monolith. Like there's no one Black experience. And
Mhm.
teaching AP African American Studies is really an opportunity to have my Caribbean students show up as themselves and be able to have conversations with my Black students and have those conversations. I have a large Hispanic Latinx population, and it's about all navigating those different stories of identity while connecting to the bigger stories, right? So when we talk about like, there's one of the lessons is about naming. I tell my kids all the time about my son and his name and how we chose his name. He has a very Afrocentric name and what that means and why our names matter. So to have the kids then go home and ask their parents about how they got their name, that's another sense of identity. It's about creating, like the curriculum has to uplift the students. Every curriculum, not just AP African American Studies, like your
That's right.
curriculum have to speak to you as a teacher and your students. And if it is not, you're probably having very long, miserable days.
Hmm. Well, let's stay there for a second. What in the curriculum, like names, like mirror your life,
In the African
right?
American Studies curriculum or in
Yeah.
general?
In
Oh,
African American studies, like, and I don't care how, like, the naming is
mm-hmm.
a significance that mirrors your life. Is there any other things that mirror your cultural practices, your spiritual practices, or just your personal practices? It doesn't necessarily have to be any of those mirror, and you're like, and you can bring in your own lived experience and say, I actually do this because of this.
Oh, thank you for that question. When I was designing what the course was going to look like for me, one of the things that was because the course is very heavily rooted in like centering, it's from the African diaspora, the African centric perspective, right? So one of the things that I thought about was libation. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna come in here and throw a plant every day. Like, we're not gonna do that, right? However, one of the first things I did, and I still do in the class, is we have what we call a class dedication. So when the students come into the class, we literally center ourselves, calm down, and then we dedicate the class to someone. So in the beginning, I would pick people that are ancestors that connect to the curriculum. And then after a while, my students really got a hang of it. And then they would shout out. So like one day a student came in and he was like, can I do the dedication? And he shouted out his aunt who had recently passed. And she was a teacher. And he told us about her and her teacher experience, right? And then my students are like, but miss, do they all have to be dead? And they come and they shout out like their grandparents. One of the questions I ask my kids is like, who would be proud of you for taking this course? Because when you bring grandma and grandpa into the classroom, you show up differently. So for me, it's very much of like, we are not doing, it's not about us. We have a legacy to uphold. We show up with our families' legacies with us every day. So when we acting a fool, you shaming the whole family. Afrocentric traditions, right? Like that's how it shows up for me. Like I can't say who's on, but let me tell y'all a funny story. I walked into my classroom one day, and truth, right? And my students know this is how I show up. And literally, the energy felt a little weird in my classroom. And I was like, we changing seats today. Like, miss, why are we changing seats? Because my ancestors said we got to change up the seats in here. And we changed the seats. And my kids know that I will talk about my ancestors and what they told me to do every day, all day long.
We love this. First of all, we love it, right? Because you also you have to call into question the things that you also were taught at home. So I hope it sparks the conversation of, hey, this is my family. Why is this bad? Right. And this was a huge social media issue last week, right? When people were like, you have to honor your ancestors. And people were like, no, you don't do that. It's like, these are your family members that paved the way for you.
Right.
And it's this big disconnect. But I think that centers it, right? I know a teacher that does that at the end of class. She makes the dedication at the end. But that is so important to then bring things. It doesn't have to be super spiritual. It's simply like, hey, call their names. They want to be remembered. They're here. They were here. Like they want to know that you've contributed. So I really appreciate that practice because it then calls into more conversation. That the conversations that need to be had that they might be conflicting with their own practices at home or whatever that may be. So I want to know, what are the topics? And I know this came up in another conversation. What are the topics that you are most like, wow, they are really into this? And I didn't think they were. Like, what topics were you most surprised at their interest?
So let me just preface, I felt the need, based on what you just said, I felt the need to go back a second. Let me just preface this conversation with, I am good at what I do.
Okay.
I teach with all my heart. I do, right? And I say that because, and the people that I know and I support, they're good at what they do. If you are not tight with your curriculum, if you are not tight with your students, if you're just out here just breaking rules, and doing what you want to do, please don't listen to my advice. You're gonna get fired, and I will not be responsible. What I do is based on, we have created a culture. My principal walks into my classroom. I have an open door policy. My teacher walks into my classroom, and they know at any moment, like, stay with it. It's gonna go somewhere. So don't listen to the first 2 seconds of what you hear and think like, I am very intentional. When I support teachers, I teach the same intentionality. We're not out here just being negligent when it comes to the education of our children. You have to do the work. You have to show up. You have to prepare to do this work. And if you don't know, I'm also very open with my whole staff when it comes to, like, I struggle with that lesson in Afrofuturism. It's not my lived experience, right? I went to one of my teachers and was like, teach me what this is. Teach me what this, like, I'm very open with my staff and everyone to be like, this is my learning moment. Help me with this. And you have to be able to ask for help. You are not the sage in that classroom. If you don't know, you don't know. So you have to be able to say, okay, I don't know what this is. When I was doing the lesson on reproductive rights and the use of women's bodies, like Lucy Amaretta, like how Dr. Marion Sims, the so-called father of gynecology, how he experimented on women's bodies, right? There's a lesson in there. When we talked about that, I went to my science teacher to help me explain some of the technical terms. Because and then we did a quick book thing on medical apartheid. But I had to put myself in the learning space to make sure when I go in there and I teach my students, I am well equipped and aware of what's going to happen. Because sometimes because a lot of what I do also is opening up the space for students to generate their own questions and be active participants in their learning. You got to be prepared to be like pull it back or guide them appropriately. So if you are also not in a learning space along with your students, please don't take my advice. You're gonna get fired. I said that twice, right? Just my full disclaimer.
Listen, she let you know.
You know, and just talking about like even with building community, the thing that just came to me is Dr. Shabaka. I don't know if you guys know Dr. Shabaka from Ancient Africa. When I was doing my whole, like I was doing a whole Kwanzaa celebration because Unit 2 gets heavy for my students. It's a lot of resistance. It's a lot of upliftment through resistance and the stories of slavery and all those things. So I reached out to some colleagues and they were like, well, Dr. Shabaka can come in and talk to your class about Kwanzaa. And then I also, rest in peace, Ma'at Tefa in Gaza, like she wrote a book on Kwanzaa. I had her come into my classroom. So it's about leveraging those resources available in Brooklyn to bring those elders into the classroom and that's the African teacher. And the African teacher is not a Black teacher. Can I just say that?
Go ahead,
when I prepare my AP African American teachers, and I always get a question by white folk, can I teach the course? Yes, you can. Because I'm gonna give you the same advice I teach Black teachers. Do not assume you understand who our students are. Do not assume that your lived experience as a Black teacher is the same of our students. It may not be. Right? So make sure that you're learning along with them. Make sure that you're asking them who they are. So I was very fortunate to bring in the elders that know the work, that know Kwanzaa much better than I know, to come talk to my students. That's creating space.
Love that. I love that you took a holistic approach, right? Bringing in the science teacher, having an interdisciplinary approach, bringing in the elders. And I wonder if that has something to do with the backlash that you experience, right? I think oftentimes folks don't understand African culture or African-centered, identity. And, there is, oftentimes a negative connotation behind it, right? And a lack of understanding. But we live in a time where folks can read, right? They can study, they can learn. And you centering the teacher as the student is so critical and so important because we don't know everything, right? And we are still learning about our own culture and uncovering things about our identity, right? About, what it means to be, African, right? And learning about the full depth and breadth of the diaspora is so critical. So I love that. As we are nearing towards the end of this conversation is just filling us up. I love your passion. I can only imagine you in a professional development with your teachers. And I would love, even to see, I think, sometimes when people push back, it's just their way of saying, I really want this, right? And, maybe there needs to be some AP African American studies for the adults, right? So that they can learn and they don't feel so left out, because the children are going to come and tell them, no, this is who I am, right? And you are not treating me as such. You are not treating me in my most divine, self. So how can schools, families, communities better support Black students in advocating for representation and access to AP courses?
Whew. Show up to the school. Like, show up. Show up to the school. Show up to and outside New York City, the school board meetings. Like, who's making those decisions? Show up. Like, they have school boards outside New York City. They have school boards. Show up to the school board, right? What I tell families in New York City in high school, well, a high school process is a serious process. Do not send your child to a school that you have not walked in. If you have not walked the building of a high school, do not send your child there because your child is there 6 hours a day. What are they experiencing? What images are they seeing? What are they feeling? There's a high school for every student. What are your family values, and does that high school speak to that? Right? Because no point sending your child to, some of these school people are fighting to get into because of the big name, because of the academic rigor they think, because it's a specialized school, and it does not speak to who your child is or your values that you want for your child.
So with that being said, if I wanted to start small, I don't know how to I'm a teacher. I love it. I want to start something. What is the smart start small space, right? What can I do tomorrow to begin to start this momentum of this space of including African American studies, especially when we're not saying it's just AP. We're saying it could be a K through 12 space, right? What does it look like? I want to start African American studies in my school this year. What is my first baby or 5 first baby steps?
I would say call the principal, call the teacher, schedule a meeting, and hey, do you need help with the library? What does your library look like? Are you like do a walkthrough with the PTA of the library, right? What does the classroom library look like? Do you need help buying books? Can I partner with an organization that have Afrocentric books or books that speak to my kids? Can we do that? Can I do read aloud at the school? Little thing, but it's about putting you, right? It's not just about the school, it's about putting you out there. Are we doing career day? Oh, no, can I do career day? Because representation matters in that way also. If mommy and daddy are African American lawyers, if they're whatever trade they have, whoever they are, they can show up to the school for career day. Because the kids need to also see the mentors. There are boys that don't have a mentoring group. Do you have an MBK chapter? Can we start one? Do you have a fathers and son activity? It's just about showing up. It's about partnering with the school.
And I like what you said, because I think a lot of people think they put it on the admin to do, right? I give you this request, go do it, right? Rather than saying, this is how I can help. This is my idea, and this is what I can do to support it, right? Because a lot of people don't understand. Schools already have a bunch of things. You adding on something different ain't going to speed it along. But when you say, I will do this part of it, it helps them out. It gives some load off of them for a new initiative. And a lot of people I gotta make a principal's like, so now I gotta make a teacher do your request, and now I gotta have this uncomfortable conversation because you requested it, rather than a parent or someone saying, I will do it. And this is what I can do, and this is how I can support, which is important.
Oh my gosh. And just to bring that full circle, I just wanna my students led me to this work. And when I say my students, it is not necessarily the students that I have taught this class to. I've had students that in the wake of Trayvon Martin's death, in the wake of all these other social unrest that came before George Floyd, they spoke to us, they voiced disconcern. They like all the students that I have failed because at that time there was no space for them in the AP studies, for all the students that we just didn't serve because we just weren't there yet, because it's a process, right?
Right.
I honor those students and I still thank them to this day. And when I see them, I'm like, you need to come back, because here's what we're doing now. It may not have served you in that moment, but your legacy, your voice, it matters now. Like, part of why we have done this is because we heard you. And I think a lot of times for schools and parents, that's also what it is. And we may not be able to make changes to the school library in that school year. It may be the next school year, right? We may not be able to make changes to the curriculum and the teacher training in that school year. It may be the next school year, but it does not mean that change is not going to happen. It just means that some change that really breaks down systemic issues takes longer.
Now, can we get a book list, sis?
Oh, yes.
We want a book list. I think that everybody's into reading and wants to do, especially in this climate, and not saying they shouldn't have been doing it a while ago, before now. But now more than ever, we're at this point in our just turning point in where we are, just socially, economically, educationally, where we have to know more. We're getting beat by history, right? Because none of this stuff, and I know you as at AP, you see this already. You probably, it's like deja vu. You're like, wait, this has happened before. Or you probably see certain things and you already know the moves, and that's what everybody's saying. Like, this is not new. We've lived through certain aspects of this already. The technology and the space is new, right? But so what would you give us in terms of a book list? And the book list is one, or just 5 books to start out with that you're like, well, these were super impactful and this will change our lives. I mean, if you can get it down to 5, that's fine. If you can't, but whatever you can remember right now. And the second thing I would say in leaving us, imparting us, and knowing what your students have embraced, but with the AP African American Studies course, what would you say you would leave us with that all kids need to know before they leave you and leave a skills building that was the most empowering and impactful for you? That you're like, if that didn't happen, change their lives. And I know you spoke about a little bit already in terms of students advocacy, but is there something else related to the course that you would leave us with? So book list is that.
Okay, that was a lot. Okay, so
I'm sorry. 2.
I think identity. I think having students understand that they can show up as their self and there's space for them, right? And when I say that in this context, I'm talking about like students with IEPs and 504s and kids that are non-traditional AP kids, because that's who I actually teach. Because I think a lot of times, I should have said that, a lot of times people think that like, oh, AP kids, no baby, no baby. I have very non-traditional students also, right? So it's about being comfortable saying, this is the help and the scaffold that I need. And being okay with that. That their voice really does matter. And if somebody doesn't hear you, talk to somebody else. Right?
But the book don't change. We're not changing the book. We putting them scaffolds in place for you to reach the book.
Exactly.
The bar is the bar. The bar is the
bar, right? But like you may need some, and we get that. And with all these AI tools, I'm for it. Like there's no reason you can't access any content or any material right now. And that's access, right? Being able to say, I have the choice to say no. Like if you decide not to do something, it should be an intelligent, articulate argument of why you said no. I'm going to respect your no, but tell me why. And relevance. Just know that you matter. Just you matter, right? And the curriculum is going, like you're going to find a space. You got me stuck on the book question though. So what the books that got me, let me go. The books that got me through my first year of African American studies was definitely Punished for Dreaming, Bettina Love. And because she frames it in a way where here's all the things that have gone wrong with education, but we still got some power and agency. So let's do something about it. I have to shout out Chris Emden, who actually showed, when I was struggling, he showed up to my course with my kids, and he gave them a pep talk. And it was so Ratchetdemic. It's How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. That's one of the texts that we use in the course. Woo. I'm trying to think what else. I'm stumped. It's just been so many books that have influenced.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I think those, hey, we starting out with those 3. We're going to start out with those 3.
But here's the thing, here's what I can do for you. So one of the things that the community did, and I do with all my AP African American Studies teachers I train them, is we have a running book list of here's the books and podcasts and movies. So I can definitely share that with you guys because it exists.
Please do. Please do.
Please.
Yes.
That is excellent. Well, thank you so much. I know we can get into the conversations, and I know you still are employed with the DOE. So we're going to just leave it. We're going to leave it. in a certain way. We don't want nobody under fire. I think we did a good job.
Sure did.
So, but thank you so much for sharing yourself with us, sis. I think you are doing an amazing job. I think our children and your legacy lives on within them, and they live within you, as I hear, right? And it's a two-way reciprocal space of their legacy in you and you and them. And it continues, and just like our ancestors, and giving honor to them. And let's close out with that. Who would we like to lift up in this space? What ancestors would we like to lift up in this space?
Oh, I got chills.
Oh yeah. Um, Fannie Lou Hamer.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mary McLeod Bethune. Yeah.
You know, I'm always going to say Harriet Tubman, Queen Mother Harriet Tubman. But I'm also going to is November is a month for me. It's the anniversary of my grandmother's passing, and so great grandma Meska the Aunt Kasa, I'm gonna uplift her tonight as well.
Oh, I'm gonna uplift my grandmother Joyce in this space. Just in remembrance of her. And Florence Connell, definitely. And to take it to our ancestor, a famous ancestor that we would say, oh God, I have so many. Ooh, I don't want to leave nobody out. But I'm gonna do Medgar Evers.
Mm.
Because of the Brooklyn space that it has allowed me to be in that space, and what I've learned in those spaces in that community. Definitely, I'm gonna leave it there in that space. But yeah, and we honor you, and we know that you live through us. You live amongst us, and you are still guiding us. So we thank you for all the Black women that are here, and the women and the men who have taken on this mantle of AP, African American Studies, and you're doing right by our children and letting stories live on within them. Because after you tell the children the story, it lives on with them.
Yes.
Okay.
So we thank you all for joining us. Thank you for community. We thank you again, Ms. Shannah Henderson-Amare, for joining us, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Have a
night.
good night, everybody.